As I walked in for the Christmas meal, I overheard her daughter-in-law ridiculing the burn marks on my wife's skin, right there at the dinner table. My son was chuckling along. Just then, her father showed up behind me. I stepped aside to speak with him. But the moment he glimpsed my wife's scars, all the color drained from his face. "I recognize those scars," he whispered. "But I should begin where this story truly starts. Allow me to share how a woman, who constructed a life of integrity, found out that her own family placed no value on the ultimate sacrifice. The type of devotion that rescues a life by sacrificing one's own body, and how a single Christmas gathering turned into the setting where the truth was finally revealed. My name is Alara Vance. I am 61 years old. I am the proprietor of a chain of specialty cookware stores across the Midwest, which I established 32 years ago. I began with one small boutique in Columbus, Ohio, and now I operate 18 locations in 5 different states. My business brings in $40 million in annual revenue. I built it all from the ground up through sheer dedication and relentless work. Yet, none of that is as significant as the story I am about to share. This narrative isn't about finances or achievement. It's about decency, about appreciation, and about how the marks on a person's skin can narrate a history of courage that some individuals would rather ignore. My wife's name is Sophia. She is 59. She is the most courageous person I have ever met, though she would deny it. She works as a high school librarian, guiding teenagers through literature for 35 years with bottomless patience. She is compassionate, giving, and modest, and she bears the physical reminders of an event that altered our existence permanently. Sophia has significant burn scars covering her right arm, her shoulder, a portion of her neck, and down her right side. They are old markings, from a quarter century ago, yet they remain prominent. The skin retains that distinct, uneven surface and discoloration that never fully disappears, regardless of the treatments attempted. For a long time, she opted for high-necked blouses, shawls, anything to keep them concealed. It wasn't out of shame, but because people would stare, they would inquire. They would make tactless remarks. However, a decade ago, Sophia resolved she was done hiding. She decided they were integral to her history, a part of her identity, and if anyone else found them objectionable, well, that was their issue, not hers. Those scars narrate an event. A tale of absolute heroism. A memory that our son, Javier, ought to recall every single day with profound thankfulness. But he doesn't. Instead, he views them as an embarrassment, something to be covered up, something to be ridiculed. A quarter century ago, we resided in a home in central Columbus. It was an older, charming 2-level house featuring polished wood floors and large bay windows. Javier was just 7 at the time. He was our only child, a lively, intelligent boy who was the focus of our universe. One evening in March, about 3 o'clock in the morning, I was roused by the scent of smoke. Initially, I dismissed it as something outdoors, perhaps a neighbor's fire pit. But the odor was too potent, too near. I rose from bed, and as I pulled open our bedroom door, I was met by a corridor thick with smoke. "Sophia, fire. The house is on fire." We both sprang up instantly. The blaze had originated in the kitchen, likely caused by faulty old electrical work. It had already engulfed the whole first floor and was rapidly ascending the staircase. The heat was searing. The smoke was choking. "Javier!" Sophia screamed. Javier is still in his room. Javier's bedroom was situated at the far end of the hallway, on the opposite side of the inferno that now obstructed the stairs. There was no path to him that didn't involve passing through the fire. "Alara, call 911. I'm going to get him." "Sophia, no. We have to wait for the fire department. There isn't time. Look how quickly it's spreading. It will be too late by the time they arrive." And before I could restrain her, Sophia grabbed a sheet, drenched it with water in the bathroom, wound it around her body, and sprinted straight into the blazing corridor. The next 5 minutes felt like an eternity. From our bedroom window, I screamed for help, watching helplessly as smoke billowed from every opening in the house. Our neighbors began to emerge onto their lawns. Someone had already dialed 911, yet everything felt like it was happening in slow motion. And then, through Javier's bedroom window, I spotted Sofia. She had made it to him. She held him in her arms, struggling to force open the window, which had warped shut from the intense heat. I watched in horror as the flames licked at her arm, her shoulder, her side, even as she battled the window. Finally, she managed to wrench it open. By then, neighbors had propped a ladder against the house. Sofia lowered Javier down first, ensuring he was secure before she descended herself. The moment her feet touched the ground, she collapsed on the grass, her clothing smoldering, her skin severely burned and blistered. The fire crews arrived shortly after and extinguished the blaze, but the devastation was complete. Our home was lost, and Sofia was left with second and third-degree burns across nearly 20% of her body. An ambulance rushed her to the hospital. Javier was okay, suffering only from smoke inhalation but otherwise unharmed. But Sofia was in a hospital bed, enduring the most excruciating pain imaginable. The physician who oversaw her care that night was Dr. Hector Ruiz. He was a specialist in burn treatment, recently back from completing a fellowship. He was brilliant, driven, and compassionate, and he became Sofia's saving grace. Over the following 6 months, Sofia required numerous operations, skin grafts, rigorous treatments to stave off infection, and intense physical therapy to restore mobility to her arm. As I walked in for our Christmas celebration, I overheard my daughter-in-law, Daniela, ridiculing the burn scars on my husband's body to the whole table. My son, Javier, was simply laughing along. Just as this happened, her father arrived right behind me. I pulled him aside. But the moment he spotted my husband's scars, his face went white. "I recognize those scars," he whispered. "But I'm getting ahead of myself, I should begin from the start. Let me share with you how a woman, who built an honorable life from the ground up, found out that her own family placed no value on the ultimate sacrifice. The kind of devotion that saves a life by sacrificing one's own body, and how a single Christmas dinner became the setting for the truth to be revealed. My name is Edwina Salazar. I am 63 years old. I am the proprietor of a chain of boutique home goods stores in the Midwest, which I established 32 years back. I began with one small location in Columbus, Ohio, and it has grown to 18 stores across 5 states. The business brings in $40 million in annual revenue. I built it all from nothing, through sheer hard work and dedication. But none of my professional success is as important as the story I am about to share. This story isn't about financial achievements. It's about decency, about thankfulness, and about how the marks on a person's body can narrate a tale of courage that some would rather ignore. My husband's name is Elias. He is 61. He is the most courageous man I have ever known, though he'd be too modest to agree. He's a high school history teacher and has been patiently instructing teenagers for 35 years. He is gentle, giving, and humble, and he bears the physical reminders of a night that altered our lives completely. Elias has significant burn scars covering his right arm, his shoulder, a portion of his neck, and down his right side. They are old injuries, from a quarter-century ago, but they remain prominent. The skin has that rippled texture, that distinct pigmentation that never truly returns to normal, regardless of the treatments we've explored. For many years, he wore long-sleeved shirts, even high-collared ones, anything to keep them covered. It wasn't out of shame, but because people would stare. They would ask intrusive questions or make tactless remarks. But about a decade ago, Elias made a decision. He was finished hiding. He decided they were a part of his history, a part of him, and if anyone else found them unsettling, well, that was their issue to deal with, not his. Those scars tell a story, you see. A story of absolute heroism. A story our son, Javier, ought to recall every day of his existence with profound gratitude. Instead, he seems to view them as an embarrassment, something to be concealed, or even, as I learned, something to ridicule. It all happened 25 years ago. We were living in an old house in downtown Columbus. It was a lovely, older 2-story home, full of character, with wood floors and large windows. Javier was just 7 years old at the time. He was our only child, a vibrant, clever boy who was our entire universe. One night, late in March, around 3 in the morning, I woke up smelling smoke. I initially dismissed it as something outdoors, perhaps a neighbor's fire pit. But the odor was too potent, too near. I rose from bed, and when I pulled open our bedroom door, the hallway was choked with thick smoke. Elias. Fire. There's a fire. We both shot out of bed. The blaze had begun in the kitchen, likely a short circuit in the home's antiquated wiring. It had already devoured the whole first floor and was rapidly crawling up the staircase. The heat was blistering, the smoke made it impossible to breathe. Javier. Elias yelled. Javier is in his room. His bedroom was down the hall, on the other side of the inferno that was now engulfing the stairs. There was no path to him that didn't involve crossing through the fire. Edwina, call 911. I'm going to get him. Elias, no. We have to wait for the fire department. There's no time, he said. Look how fast it's spreading. He'll be gone by the time they arrive. And before I could physically restrain him, Elias ran to our bathroom, soaked a large bedsheet in the tub, wounded around himself, and charged into that blazing hallway. What came next were the most agonizing 5 minutes of my existence. I screamed for help from our bedroom window, watching black smoke billow from every opening of our home. Neighbors began to spill out onto the street. 911 had been called, but time itself seemed to stretch and slow down. And then, I saw Elias at Javier's bedroom window. He had gotten to him. He was holding our son, desperately trying to force open the window, which had apparently warped shut from the intense heat. I watched in horror as the flames licked at his arm, his shoulder, his side, as he wrestled with that stuck window. Finally, he broke it open. Some of our neighbors had managed to raise a ladder. Elias passed Javier down first, ensuring he was safe before he attempted to climb down himself. The moment his feet touched the grass, he collapsed on the lawn, his clothes smoldering, his skin horribly red and blistered. The fire engines arrived just minutes later and subdued the blaze, but the devastation was complete. Our home was gone, and Elias was rushed to the hospital with second and third-degree burns covering nearly 20% of his body. Javier was miraculously fine, just suffering from some smoke inhalation, but otherwise unharmed. And Elias, my Elias, was in a hospital bed, enduring the most excruciating pain imaginable. The physician who took charge of his case that night was a Dr. Hector Ruiz. He was a specialist in burn treatment, recently back from a fellowship. He was young, brilliant, and committed, and he became Elias's protector. Over the following 6 months, Elias required numerous surgeries, complex skin grafts, constant treatments to ward off infection, and grueling physical therapy to restore mobility to his arm. It was half a year of unrelenting agony, of procedures that were themselves agonizing, of moments where I truly feared I might lose him. Not from the injuries themselves, but from the sheer physical and emotional toll. But Dr. Ruiz was relentless. He checked on Elias daily, modifying treatments, employing new methods, ensuring he got the absolute best care. And he always said the same thing to him. Mr. Salazar, you are a hero. What you did for your boy is the most courageous act I've ever witnessed. Those scars aren't a source of shame. They are medals of honor. Elias eventually recovered. Not fully, of course. The scars were permanent and always would be. But he regained the use of his arm. He got his life back. He was able to return to teaching and live a normal life. And Dr. Ruiz, he relocated. Just a few months after Elias came home from the hospital, Dr. Ruiz accepted a position at a prominent hospital in New York City. We bid him farewell with immense gratitude, promising to stay in contact, a promise that, as they often do, gradually faded with the passing of time. Javier was 7 when Elias rescued him. For years afterward, he was such a thankful boy. He would hug his father every day, telling him he loved him, that Elias was his hero. He would boast to his schoolmates about how his dad had saved him from the fire. But as Javier got older, something shifted. Perhaps it was just teenage self-consciousness. Perhaps it was peer pressure. Or perhaps he simply forgot. He forgot the horror of that night. He forgot the sacrifice. He forgot that his life continued only because his father had charged through a wall of fire for him. When Javier turned 15, he began to show embarrassment over Elias's scars. "Dad, why don't you wear a long-sleeved shirt?" he'd ask when we had to attend a school function. "People stare at you." Elias tried to reason with him. "Javier, these scars are here because I saved you. They are not something to be ashamed of." "I know, Dad, but people don't get it. And it's just awkward having to explain it over and over." As time went on, it only deteriorated. Javier avoided having friends over. He'd make excuses for Elias not to attend his events. When I'd press him on it, the answer was invariably the same. "It's complicated, Mom. You just don't understand what it's like at school." I attempted to speak with him, to make him grasp the gravity of what Elias had done for him, but Javier would just shrug it off, mumble that he already knew, and quickly change the topic. Elias was deeply wounded by this, but being the gentle soul he is, he always found excuses for him. "He's just a teenager, Edwina. All teenagers get embarrassed by their parents. He'll grow out of it." But he never did. It intensified. Javier went to study business in Chicago. We funded his entire education, his apartment, everything. Throughout those college years, he barely visited. There was always an excuse, a big project, exams, homework. And when he did bother to come home, the visits were short and strained, feeling more like a duty he had to check off than a son happy to see his family. 3 years ago, Javier introduced us to Daniela. She's 28, a corporate attorney from an affluent New York family. She is polished, educated, and attractive, but from the very first minute I met her, something about her set me on edge. She had a way of looking at Elias that wasn't kind. It was appraising, almost critical, like she was scanning him for defects. And when her gaze landed on Elias's scars, though she attempted to mask it, I saw the clear judgment in her eyes. As they dated, Daniela began making little remarks. They were phrased as helpful concern, but they were plainly just criticisms in disguise. "Mr. Salazar, have you ever looked into laser treatments for your scars? The technology now is just incredible, it can really enhance the skin's appearance." Elias would just smile politely. "I've tried numerous treatments over the years, Daniela. This is the result of all that effort." "Oh, I see," she'd say. "It's just, well, for the wedding pictures, it would be so much better if they were less distracting. Perhaps some professional concealer?" I could see the flash of pain in Elias's eyes. But, as always, he answered with grace. "I'll look into it." And Javier? He never defended his father. He just sat there quietly, as if Daniela's comments were perfectly reasonable, as if Elias had some sort of duty to hide the very scars he'd gotten saving his son's life. The wedding took place 2 years ago. It was a large, formal affair in Chicago with 200 attendees. And just as I'd expected, throughout the planning, Daniela was full of suggestions on how Elias should dress, what kind of suit he should wear to cover his neck, and how to manage the scars so they wouldn't ruin the photos. And Elias, bless his heart, did as they asked. He wore a handsome but stifling high-collared shirt and jacket in the middle of June. He endured makeup being applied to the visible portions of the scars to minimize them. All of this just so his own son and new daughter-in-law wouldn't feel embarrassed by him on their wedding day. As I watched my dear Elias at the reception, clearly uncomfortable in those suffocating clothes, smiling bravely despite the humiliation of being treated like something to be concealed, I made a silent vow. If Javier and Daniela kept going down this road, if they continued to treat Elias with such profound disrespect, I would ensure there were consequences. I wasn't sure what form they would take, but I knew I couldn't allow it to continue forever. After they married, Javier and Daniela settled in New York City for their careers. Our contact dwindled. Visits were few and far between, phone calls were short. And when they did visit, Daniela always had a new critique, something about our home, our clothes, or Elias that needed fixing. The most heartbreaking part was that Javier enabled her, or at the very least, he never challenged her. He had become a silent bystander as his wife treated his father with thinly veiled disdain. This year, they promised to come for Christmas dinner. It would be the first time we'd laid eyes on them in half a year. Elias was so excited. He spent days in the kitchen, preparing all of Javier's childhood favorites, decorating the house with the loving care of a father who desperately missed his son. "Edwina," he said to me, "perhaps this Christmas will be different. Perhaps Daniela has warmed up a bit. Perhaps Javier will finally remember." "Maybe," I replied. "I love you, my dear. But please, be prepared in case it's not." "Oh, I'm always optimistic." "It's just my way," he said. And that was the honest truth. Elias, after everything he'd been through, still held on to his optimism. He still believed in the inherent goodness of people and held out hope that his son would recall the lifetime of love he'd been given. Dinner was set for 8 o'clock on Christmas Eve. Javier and Daniela were due to arrive around 7 to help with the last-minute details. They also mentioned that Daniela's father was visiting from New York and would be joining them. "It's Dr. Ruiz," Daniela mentioned on the phone. "My father. He's a burn specialist. You don't mind if we bring him, do you?" "Of course not," Elias had replied instantly. "Any family of Javier's is always welcome here." But when I heard that name, Ruiz, and that he was a burn specialist, a connection sparked in my mind. Could it possibly be? Could it be the same Dr. Hector Ruiz who had saved Elias's life 25 years prior? It's a big world, I know. There must be many doctors named Ruiz. Still, the coincidence felt extraordinary that I brought it up with Elias. "Do you suppose it could be the same doctor?" "I have no idea," he mused. "It would be astonishing if it were. I've always wished I could thank him again, properly, for all he did." "Well," I said, "perhaps this Christmas will hold a wonderful surprise for us, besides just seeing Javier." December 24th finally came. Elias had been cooking all day long. He'd made a roast turkey, his special stuffing, tamales, an apple salad, and his famous homemade eggnog. The house was decorated beautifully with lights and a magnificent tree, full of seasonal warmth. I was running a bit late getting home, as I'd had to go and personally close one of my stores. The manager had called out sick. It was about 7:30 p.m. when I pulled my car into the driveway. And that's when I heard it, a sound that made my blood run cold with rage. Drifting through the slightly open living room window, I heard Daniela's voice, sharp and derisive. "Oh, Mr. Salazar, are you actually planning to wear that shirt? Your scars are completely visible. It just looks, well, it looks like you've been in a dreadful accident." And then, I heard something even more sickening. I heard the sound of my own son, Javier, laughing. The boy Elias had sacrificed his own body to save, laughing at his father's scars. I stood frozen by the front door, just for a second, trying to absorb what I'd just witnessed. My son's laughter. My daughter-in-law's cruelty. All directed at the man who had, quite literally, walked through fire to give Javier his life. I drew a long, slow breath, forcing down the fury that wanted to explode. I knew if I stormed in screaming, if I confronted them in that state, I'd lose any chance of handling this properly. I needed a moment. I needed a plan. Then, I heard another voice from inside. It was Elias, his tone strained, clearly trying to sound pleasant despite the pain I knew he was feeling. "It's the shirt I wear every Christmas, Daniela. Edwina is quite fond of it." "Well, maybe Edwina needs to update her taste," Daniela retorted with a brittle laugh. "Javier, honestly, tell your dad to change into something more suitable. We do have more guests arriving, don't we? We wouldn't want to make anyone uncomfortable." "Dad," Javier chimed in, "Daniela kind of has a point. Maybe you could just put on a sweater or something over that." That was the final straw. I opened the front door and strode inside. The three of them were in the living room. Elias was standing near the Christmas tree, his face a mask trying to conceal the hurt. Javier was lounging on the sofa, beer in hand, with Daniela beside him, her smirk vanishing the instant she saw my expression. "Good evening," I said, my voice quiet but firm, leaving no doubt as to my state of mind. "Mom," Javier said, scrambling to his feet. "You're late." "Yes, I had to lock up the shop. But it appears I've arrived at just the perfect moment." "In time for what?" Daniela asked, her innocence completely feigned. "In time to overhear your little chat about Elias's shirt." The silence that fell in the room was immediate and heavy. Javier suddenly found the floor fascinating. Daniela, however, simply straightened her back, clearly preparing for a fight. And Elias, he looked at me with desperate, pleading eyes that silently begged, "Please, Edwina, don't make a scene." But for once, I was going to ignore that gentle plea. Because my husband deserved to be defended, especially since his own son refused to do it. "Daniela, that shirt you find so distasteful is the same one Elias has worn for Christmas dinner for 2 decades. And those scars you find so uncomfortable are the direct result of my husband running through a wall of flames to save the life of the man you married. Perhaps you could show an ounce of respect." "Edwina, I was merely suggesting." "You were not suggesting. You were mocking. I heard you loud and clear from the driveway." Javier jumped in then, trying to de-escalate. "Mom, nobody was mocking. We were just talking about clothes, about what looks appropriate." "And you, Javier? Do you also believe your father needs to hide the scars he earned by saving you?" "It's not that. It's just, Mom, we live in a world where appearance matters. And Dad could make a small effort to look more presentable." At that, something inside me didn't just break, it fractured into ice. It wasn't hot rage, but something far colder and more precise. My son. The boy I raised, educated, and supported his entire life, had just called his own father not presentable because of the very marks that proved his love. "Elias," I said, turning to my husband. "Dearest, could you please check on something in the kitchen? I need to have a private word with Javier and Daniela." "Edwina, please," he whispered. "I don't want this to spoil Christmas." "It won't spoil anything. I simply need to make a few things crystal clear." Elias nodded and left the room, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The moment he was gone, I fixed my gaze on Javier and Daniela with an expression that conveyed my absolute seriousness. "Here is precisely what is going to happen. You are both going to go into that kitchen and apologize to Elias. You will tell him you were disgusting and wrong. And you will spend the rest of this evening treating him with the profound respect he has earned. Or, you can both get your coats and leave my house right now." "Mom, you are completely overreacting," Javier snapped. "Overreacting?" I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Javier, your father ran through a burning building for you. He endured months of unimaginable agony during his recovery. He carries those marks on his body every single day as a testament to the greatest sacrifice a parent can make. And you laugh at them. You are ashamed of them. How do you even look at yourself in the mirror? You just don't get the social pressure, Mom. People judge. Then let them judge." I shot back. "Your job is to defend your father, not to join the pack of critics." Daniela finally spoke up, her tone hardening. "Edwina, with all due respect, I believe you are being far too sensitive about this. It was a simple observation about his shirt, not a personal attack." "Too sensitive?" "Daniela, let me explain something to you about those scars. Every single mark on his body represents a second that Elias was prioritizing his son's life over his own. Each one is a medal of courage that people like you will never comprehend, let alone earn. And if you are incapable of seeing that, if all you see is something aesthetically uncomfortable, then you are precisely the kind of shallow person I do not want in my home." "Are you throwing me out?" she gasped. "I am giving you a choice. You can stay, on the condition of absolute respect, or you can leave with your pettiness." Javier shot to his feet, his face red. Mom, you cannot talk to my wife that way. I can, and I am. Because someone in this family needs to draw a line, and since you clearly won't, I will. Just as the words left my mouth, the doorbell rang. The three of us stood frozen in a tense stalemate. I walked to the door and opened it. Standing on the porch was a gentleman of about 65, impeccably dressed, with silver hair and a kind face. He held a bottle of wine and a gift bag. "Good evening," he said. "I'm Hector Ruiz, Daniela's father. My apologies for the delay, the traffic was dreadful." In that single instant, it all clicked into place. It was him. It was the Dr. Hector Ruiz, the man who had saved Elias 25 years ago. He was older, yes, with more gray hair, but it was unmistakably him. "Dr. Ruiz," I said, offering my hand. "Edwina Salazar. It is truly an honor to have you in our home." "The honor is all mine, Mrs. Salazar. Daniela has told me so much about you." I highly doubted she had told him anything good about me, based on the last 5 minutes, but I kept my composure. "Please, come in. Actually, wait. Doctor, there is something I must speak with you about privately before you come inside." His kind expression faltered. "Is something amiss?" "Something incredibly important, yes. It concerns your daughter, my son, and my husband." I guided him just off the porch, to the side of the house where Javier and Daniela couldn't overhear us. I quickly recounted what I had heard upon my arrival, what I had just witnessed, the appalling way Daniela had spoken to Elias. Dr. Ruiz listened, and his face grew increasingly grave. "That does not sound like the daughter I raised," he said, his voice tight. "Daniela can be direct, but mocking a person's scars? That is utterly unacceptable. Doctor, there's another piece to this that you must know. My husband, Elias. I believe you know him. 25 years ago, we had a terrible house fire. Elias sustained massive burns while saving our son. And the doctor who treated him, the doctor who saved his life, it was you." I watched the realization wash over his face, followed by profound shock. "Elias? Elias Salazar is your husband?" "Yes." "My goodness. It can't be. I had no idea Daniela married your son. I never connected the names. All these years. I've often wondered what became of Elias. If he made a full recovery, if he had a good life." "He has had a wonderful life," I said. "Right up until our son decided those scars were an embarrassment." Dr. Ruiz looked pained. "I need to see him. I need to speak with him. And Edwina, I want you to know, if my daughter has behaved in the manner you've described, I will rectify this immediately. Then please, come with me." We entered the house together. Javier and Daniela were still standing in the living room, whispering furiously to each other, no doubt complaining about my overreaction. Elias had just emerged from the kitchen and was standing by the dining room table, adjusting the place settings. The moment Dr. Ruiz saw Elias, he stopped cold. Elias, hearing us enter, turned around. Their eyes met across the room, and I saw the recognition click in my husband's mind. "Dr. Ruiz," he whispered, astonished. "Elias," the doctor breathed. "My goodness. Elias." He walked toward him slowly, as if approaching a phantom from his past. When he was standing right in front of him, when he could clearly see the scars on his arm, his shoulder, and his neck, his face went pale. "I know these scars," he murmured, his voice heavy with emotion. "I treated these scars. I was there, every day, for 6 months, willing them to heal." Elias was speechless. "Doctor. I cannot believe it's you, after all this time." "Let me see," Dr. Ruiz said gently. With Elias's unspoken consent, the doctor examined the scars, not just with a clinical eye, but with something more, with the pride of a craftsman seeing his finest work, with the emotion of a rescuer meeting the one he'd saved. "They healed well, Elias. Better than I'd dared to hope in those first few weeks. The grafts took beautifully. The mobility in the arm, it's preserved. You did all that dreadful physical therapy I prescribed, didn't you? Elias nodded. Every single day for 2 years, doctor. You saved my life. No, Dr. Ruiz said, shaking his head. You saved yourself, Elias. You were strong enough to survive. I just assisted with the mechanics. Daniela had drifted into the dining room, watching this reunion with total confusion. Dad, she said. You know Mr. Salazar? Dr. Ruiz turned to face his daughter, and his expression was one I'd never seen on him before. It was pure, unadulterated disappointment mixed with a quiet, simmering fury. Yes, Daniela. I know Elias. 25 years ago, I was the lead physician on his case after he ran through a burning house to save his son's life. It remains one of the most severe burn cases I have ever managed. And, he added, looking back at Elias, it was also one of the most inspiring. Because this man never once gave up. He never complained. He faced unimaginable pain with grace. He turned back to his daughter. I didn't know that. Clearly, you didn't know much at all, Dr. Ruiz said, his voice like steel. Because if you understood even a tiny fraction of what Elias endured, of what he sacrificed, you would never have had the audacity to mock his scars. What? Who told you that? Edwina told me, he replied. And I need to know, from you, if it is true. Did you mock Elias's scars? Did you make cruel comments about his appearance? Did you treat the man who bears the marks of a heroism you couldn't possibly fathom with contempt? Daniela's eyes darted to Javier, searching for support. But my son, for the first time all night, seemed to grasp the enormity of his actions. He was white as a sheet, his hands visibly trembling. Dad, I was just suggesting that maybe he could wear a different shirt. Suggesting? Dr. Ruiz cut her off. Daniela, I am well aware of the difference between a suggestion and mockery. And according to Edwina, not only did you make these repulsive comments, but Elias's own son, the very man who is only alive today because his father ran through that fire, stood right beside you and laughed. All attention in the room snapped to Javier. My son, my cowardly son, tried to stammer his way out of it. It was just a nervous laugh, Mom. I didn't mean. A nervous laugh? I cut him off. Javier, I heard you perfectly clearly from the driveway. There was nothing nervous about that laugh. It was pure, unadulterated mockery. Finally, my dear Elias spoke, his voice trembling but clear. Javier, why? After all this time, why are you so deeply ashamed of the scars I received saving your life? Dad, I'm not ashamed. Yes, you are, Elias said, the years of pain finally surfacing. You have made that painfully clear since you were a teenager. You never wanted me at your school events. You wouldn't bring your friends to the house. You were always asking me to cover up. And I just assumed one day you'd grow out of it, that you'd finally understand. But you only got worse. And now you've married a woman who feels the same disdain. Mr. Salazar, I do not have disdain. Daniela began. Be quiet, Dr. Ruiz commanded, his voice sharp and leaving no room for argument. Do not say one more word, Daniela. Every syllable that leaves your mouth right now will only dig this hole deeper. He then turned to my husband, his face a mask of profound apology. Elias, on behalf of my daughter, I am so sorry. I know that's not nearly enough. I raised her to be better than this. To have empathy, to respect others, especially those who have suffered. It's clear to me now that I failed somewhere dreadful in her upbringing. Doctor, you don't need to apologize for. Elias started, ever the peacemaker. Yes, Elias, I do. Because while Daniela is an adult and must answer for her own behavior, I am her father. And to see my daughter act with such cruelty, it simply breaks my heart. Dad, you're exaggerating this whole thing. Daniela protested. Exaggerating? Dr. Ruiz's voice rose. Daniela, do you have any idea how many times during those 6 months of treatment I was convinced Elias wouldn't survive? How many nights I lay awake researching new grafting techniques, new treatments, because I simply could not accept losing a patient with such courage. Elias isn't just some former patient to me. He is a living reminder of why I chose my specialty in the first place, to save heroes just like him. Dr. Ruiz then turned to me. Edwina, I would completely understand if you wanted both Daniela and me to leave your home this instant. This behavior is unforgivable. No, doctor, I said firmly. You are more than welcome here. It is Javier and Daniela who have a decision to make, whether they can stay and show my husband the respect he deserves, or if they would prefer to leave. Javier finally spoke, and for the first time in what felt like a decade, I detected a note of actual sincerity in his voice. Mom. Dad. I'm so sorry. You're right. I've been a complete fool. I've let what other people might think matter more than honoring your sacrifice, Dad. I have no excuse. And what changed, Javier? I asked, my voice cold. Why the apology now? Is it just because Dr. Ruiz is here to confront you? Because you've realized there are finally consequences? No, he said, shaking his head. It's hearing Dr. Ruiz talk about what Dad went through. Seeing the respect he has for his scars, it made me see how monstrous I've been. Dad, those scars. I should be celebrating them, not hiding them. Tears were now streaming silently down Elias's face. Javier, he whispered, I only ever wanted you to be proud of me. I just wanted you to remember that I did it all out of love for you. I know, Dad. And I am so sorry. The silence that fell after my son's apology was heavy, thick with years of unspoken pain, of bitterness that was finally seeing the light of day. Elias was weeping quietly, and I watched Javier, truly seeing him grapple with the weight of the damage he had caused. But I was not satisfied with words. Words had become too easy for him. An apology made in the heat of confrontation felt convenient. I needed to know if this remorse was real or just a performance now that he'd been exposed in front of his father-in-law. Javier, I said, my tone flat, apologies are a starting point, but they are not nearly enough. Not after years of making your father feel small. Not after being ashamed of him. Not after permitting your wife to treat him with such contempt. I know, Mom. I'm going to make it right. I'll change. How? I pressed. How, specifically, are you going to make it right? Javier looked at Elias, then at me, fumbling for an answer. I'll make sure everyone knows the truth. That Dad is a hero. That his scars are honorable. That sounds lovely in theory, Javier. But I need more than vague promises. Dr. Ruiz stepped in, standing near Elias like a guardian. Edwina is right, son. Your father deserves far more than words. He deserves sustained, consistent action for years to come, not just a quick apology the moment you're called out. Daniela, who had been silent, finally spoke, her voice small and thin. Mrs. Salazar. Elias. I am sorry, too. I know my apology probably means very little right now, but it is genuine. I didn't understand the story behind the scars. And while that's no excuse for my comments, I want you to know that if you had known what? I interrupted. If you had known the story, you would have been polite? Daniela, you should not need to know the history of someone's scars to treat them with basic human decency. Every scar, every mark on a person's body, has a story, and none of them deserve to be mocked. You're right, she whispered. You're completely right. Furthermore, I continued, you have been married to my son for 2 years. In all that time, did he never bother to tell you how his father got those scars? Did he never once mention that he was rescued from a fire? Daniela glanced at Javier, who looked down, his shame radiating off him. He mentioned a fire when he was a kid. But he never gave me any details. And I never asked. Because you didn't care to, Elias said, his voice quiet but piercing. You didn't care to actually know me, to know my story. You only cared about how I looked, whether or not I fit into your perfect picture of what a father-in-law should be. Mr. Salazar, that's not fair. Not fair? Elias countered. Daniela, for 2 years, you have made little comments about my appearance, my clothes, my scars. Always wrapped up as suggestions or concern, but every one of them carried the exact same message, that I, as I am not good enough. Dr. Ruiz placed a gentle, steadying hand on my husband's shoulder. Elias, you have every right to feel that way. And if I may, I'd like to say something to everyone. Elias nodded. The doctor turned to our family, his gaze sweeping over all of us. I have been a burn specialist for 40 years. I have seen thousands of patients, thousands of cases. And I can tell you, with absolute, unwavering certainty, Elias Salazar is one of the bravest human beings I have ever had the privilege to treat. Not just for what he did that night, but for how he endured the months of recovery that followed. He looked directly at Javier. You were only 7, so you can't be expected to remember the details. But your father was in a pain that most people cannot even conceive of. 3rd-degree burns are agonizing. The daily dressing changes were a form of torture. The skin grafts required multiple, painful surgeries. The physical therapy just to get his arm to move again was brutal. I didn't know it was that bad, Javier murmured. How could you not know? I asked him. You never asked. You never once wanted to know what your father suffered for you. My parents never talked about it, he said, trying to defend himself. They said it was better not to remember, Dr. Ruiz corrected him gently. Because your father didn't want you to be burdened with guilt. But Javier, that didn't mean you were meant to forget the sacrifice. It meant you were supposed to honor it. Elias spoke again, wiping his eyes. I never wanted Javier to feel guilty. He was just a child. The fire wasn't his fault. But I did hope. I hoped that when he grew up, when he could understand, that he would be proud. Proud to have a father who loved him enough to run through fire for him. I am proud, Dad. I swear I am. Really? I challenged him. Because your actions for the past 15 years have said the exact opposite. Hiding him from your friends. Asking him to cover up. Laughing when your wife mocks his scars. Those are not the actions of a proud son, Javier. Those are the actions of a shamed one. You're right, he whispered. Mom, Dad, I am going to spend the rest of my life making this up to you. Proving that I appreciate what you did. Before you make any more grand promises, Javier, I said, stepping forward, there is something you must understand. This is not the first time your behavior has deeply wounded your father. This has been a pattern for years. And every single time, he forgave you. He made excuses for you. He hoped you would change. But I no longer have that patience. What do you mean? I mean that your actions have consequences, I said. Not just apologies, but real, tangible consequences. What kind of consequences? I took my phone from my pocket and opened a file I had prepared 6 months earlier, after the last time Javier had humiliated Elias. It was a document I had prayed I would never need to use, but the time had come. 6 months ago, after you called and asked your father not to attend your work presentation because his appearance might make your clients uncomfortable, I visited my lawyer. I had some changes made to my will. I saw the color drain from Javier's face. Mom, no. Don't. Let me finish. Originally, my entire estate was designated for you. The stores, our properties, the investments. Everything. It's an estate valued at approximately $50 million. Mom, please. But after watching you treat your father with escalating disrespect for years, after seeing you prioritize the opinions of total strangers over the love of the man who saved your life, I made a new decision. The will now stipulates that you will receive only 30% of the estate. The remaining 70% is to be donated to charities that support burn victims, to help other people just like your father who need treatment and care. Mom. You can't do that. I already have, I said flatly. It is filed, it is legal, and it is final. Unless. Unless what? He breathed. Unless you can prove, over the next 5 years, that you have genuinely changed. That you treat your father with the respect and honor he deserves. That you are publicly proud of him and his story. That you raise any children you may have to know and venerate the sacrifice their grandfather made. If you can do all of that, and sustain it for 5 full years without a single relapse, then I will consider modifying the will. 5 years? Mom, that's such a long time. 5 years is nothing, I snapped, compared to the 25 years your father has lived with these scars. If you cannot commit to 5 years of basic human decency, then you most certainly do not deserve the inheritance. Daniela looked utterly horrified. Edwina, that seems excessive. One mistake shouldn't cost that much. This wasn't one mistake, Daniela, I said. This was the culmination of years of consistent, cruel behavior. And you proved tonight that you share his lack of respect. So let me be perfectly clear with you, as well. If you continue to treat Elias this way, you will not just be affecting Javier's inheritance. You will be cut off from this family. Completely. No more dinners. No more holidays. No more support from us of any kind. Dr. Ruiz nodded slowly. Edwina, I believe you are being more than fair. And Daniela, you need to wake up and understand that actions have consequences. You cannot treat people with such callousness and expect no repercussions. But Dad. Daniela started to whine. Don't call me Dad right now, he said, his voice laced with disappointment. I am deeply, profoundly disappointed in you. And Daniela, this affects our relationship, too. Because if you cannot find it in yourself to respect a man who suffered the unspeakable to save his own child, how can I possibly trust your judgment or your character in any other part of your life? You're being dramatic, she whispered. No, I am being realistic. Elias is not just a former patient to me. He is a symbol of the good that medicine can do, a testament to the bravery of the human spirit. And to see my own daughter mock him, mock his scars, it makes me question everything I thought I taught you about empathy and compassion. At that, Daniela finally broke. She began to cry. But these were not the crocodile tears of before, they looked like the real, painful tears of someone who was finally, truly understanding the magnitude of what she had done. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. You should have known better, he said, his voice softening slightly but still firm. Regardless of the story, Daniela. Regardless of the circumstances. You never mock someone's scars. Ever. Elias, being the good man he is, finally intervened, his voice full of compassion. Hector. Daniela is your daughter. And even though she has hurt me deeply, I can see that she is learning. We all deserve a chance to learn and to grow. Elias, you are far too generous, Dr. Ruiz said. I've endured a lot, Elias agreed. But I've also learned that holding on to all this anger only ends up hurting me. So, Daniela, I accept your apology. But I need what my wife needs. I need to see real, lasting change. Not just words. I will, Mr. Salazar. I promise, she wept. I turned back to my son. And you, Javier. I need you to understand something critical. Your father and I will not be here forever. I am 63. He is 61. And when we are gone, when it is far too late to say you're sorry, I do not want you to live with the crushing remorse of having treated him this badly during his final years. Because that kind of remorse, that guilt will haunt you for every day you have left. I understand, Mom. I do. Do you? Because I have heard these promises before, and you always fall back into your old, shameful patterns. So this time, I need more than a promise. I need a commitment. A plan. What do you want me to do? First, I said, I want you to tell the story. The full story. Not just to Daniela, but to everyone. To your friends, your colleagues, to anyone who has ever looked at your father's scars and wondered. I want you to say, with pride, my father is a hero who ran through a burning building to save my life. I'll do it, he said immediately. Second, I want you to visit him. Regularly. Not once every 6 months, but at least once a month. Real, quality time where you actually talk to him, where you get to know him as the man he is today, not just as the father who saved you 25 years ago. I can do that. And finally, I said, when you have children, you will teach them from the day they are born about their grandfather's sacrifice. They will grow up knowing that scars are not things to be ashamed of, but marks of love and profound bravery. When we have children, Javier promised, looking at Daniela, who nodded, her face still wet with tears, it will be the first story we teach them. Dr. Ruiz checked his watch. Edwina, Elias, if you'll still have me, I would like to stay for dinner. Not just for Daniela's sake, but because I genuinely want to spend this evening with you. To get to know you both again, after all these years. To celebrate that Elias not only survived, but thrived. It would be our honor, Hector, Elias said, a true, genuine smile touching his lips for the first time all evening. But first, Dr. Ruiz continued, I have a request. Elias, would you permit me to photographically document your scars? With your full permission, of course. I am writing a book about the most extraordinary cases of my career. Your story deserves to be told. Not just the medical side, but the human story behind those scars. A book? Elias asked, surprised. Yes. A book about the heroism of burn patients. About how they survive, not just physically, but emotionally. And Elias, your case remains one of the most inspiring I have ever known. If you'll agree, of course. There is no pressure. Elias looked at me, a question in his eyes. What do you think, Edwina? I smiled. I think it's a beautiful, fitting way to honor your sacrifice, my dear. To make sure your story inspires others who might be going through the same thing. Then yes, Doctor, Elias said, turning back to him. I would be honored to be a part of your book. Excellent, Dr. Ruiz beamed. We'll arrange the photos and interviews in the coming weeks. Javier moved toward his father, hesitating for just a moment before wrapping his arms around him in a hug. Dad, thank you. For saving me 25 years ago. And for forgiving me today. For being the strongest man I know. Elias hugged him back, fresh tears welling. Javier, you are my son. You will always be my son, and I will always love you. No matter what. But I need you to respect me, too. I will, Javier choked out. I promise. Our Christmas dinner finally began, nearly 2 hours late, but the atmosphere in the room was entirely transformed. Dr. Ruiz told stories from his long career, of other courageous patients, of the incredible advances in burn treatments over the last quarter-century. Elias shared memories from his recovery, things he had never even told me, painful, awful things, but also moments of incredible strength. And Javier. Javier listened. He truly listened. For the first time in his adult life, I saw the understanding dawning in his eyes, the remorse truly settling into his bones, and a new determination forming. Daniela, too, participated. She asked questions, showing what appeared to be genuine interest. And although the tension had not vanished entirely, there was something new in the room, hope. A fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, tonight was the breaking point our family desperately needed. When the dinner was over, the gifts exchanged, and the eggnog served, I sat in my armchair and just watched my family. Elias and Dr. Ruiz were chatting animatedly about the book. Javier was showing Daniela old photographs from before the fire, explaining what our lives were like back then. And for the first time in so long, I felt a real, actual hope. Not the blind optimism Elias always clung to, but a hope based on evidence. That finally, after so many years of silence and resentment, We had had the conversation that might just save us. Elias's scars would never fade. But perhaps, just perhaps, the way our son saw them had been changed forever. The days that followed that Christmas were different. It wasn't a magical, overnight transformation, but the changes were subtle, and they mattered. Javier called his father every single day. Not a superficial check-in, but a real conversation. He asked about his day, his students, his feelings. And most importantly, he listened to the answers. Daniela called, too. Less frequently, and with a lingering awkwardness, but she was trying. And that, I supposed, was a start. Dr. Ruiz, true to his word, kept his promise. Just 2 weeks after that tense Christmas, Dr. Ruiz returned to our home, but this time with a professional photographer and a small recording team. He spent the next 3 hours meticulously documenting my husband's scars from every possible angle, using professional lighting and treating Elias with a profound, almost reverent, respect. These photographs are for an entire chapter in the book, he explained as he worked. It's not just about the medical treatment. It's about the human story, why it happened, your recovery, and how you've lived with these scars for 25 years. Doctor, Elias said quietly, I never imagined my scars could actually help anyone else. Elias, Dr. Ruiz replied, pausing his work, your story has the power to help thousands. Other burn patients who are struggling to accept their new reality. Families who are learning how to support a loved one. Anyone who needs a tangible example of pure courage. During the photo session, Javier and Daniela arrived. They gave an excuse about being in the area, but I knew they had come intentionally, perhaps to show support, or perhaps to see the process for themselves. Javier just stood and watched Dr. Ruiz work, handling his father's scars with such care, explaining the history of each graft and mark to the photographer. And that's when I saw my son crying, silently, as if he was finally, after all these years, processing the true extent of what his father had endured for him. When the session concluded, Javier approached Dr. Ruiz. Doctor, can I ask you something? Of course, Javier. When my father was in the hospital, when you were treating him, did you ever think he wasn't going to survive? Dr. Ruiz considered the question for a long moment. Honestly? Yes. There were several moments during those first 2 weeks when his condition was critical. The burns were extensive, the risk of infection was astronomical. His body was in profound shock. There was a very real chance he wouldn't make it. What changed? Javier whispered. What made him survive? His willpower, Dr. Ruiz said without hesitation. Your father, Javier, is one of the most determined human beings I have ever met. Every single day, no matter how excruciating the pain, no matter how brutal the physical therapy was, he got up and he fought. And when I asked him where he found that strength, do you know what he told me? What? He told me, I have a 7-year-old son who needs me. I can't give up. You were his motivation, Javier. Every single day for 6 agonizing months, he thought about you. About watching you grow up, about being there for you. He was making sure the sacrifice he made was worth it. Javier simply broke. He sank onto the sofa, buried his head in his hands, and sobbed in a way I hadn't seen since he was a little boy. And I repaid him with shame, he choked out. With years of making him feel like those scars were something awful. Elias sat down beside him, wrapping his scarred arm around our son's shaking shoulders. Javier. Look at me. My son looked up, his eyes red and raw. I didn't do what I did expecting to be thanked for the rest of my life. I did it because I love you. Because you are my son. And even though you hurt me with your shame, I also understand. You were young, and social pressure is a powerful, real thing. You made mistakes. But years of mistakes, Dad. I can't just. You can't change the past, Elias said firmly. But you can change the future. That, Javier, is what I need from you now. Not your guilt, not your pity. I need your action. Show me with your actions, from this day forward, that you understand. That you value this. That you are proud. I will, Javier swore, his voice thick. I swear I will. Daniela then approached, kneeling on the floor in front of Elias. Mr. Salazar. I want to apologize again. But not just with words. I want to do something. Something to show that I finally understand. What did you have in mind, Daniela? I asked. I've been thinking ever since Christmas. I'd like to offer my legal services, pro bono, to any charity that works with burn victims. To help them with negligence cases, or with insurance companies that refuse to pay for treatments. Any legal battle these people are facing. Dr. Ruiz's face lit up. Daniela, that's wonderful. You have no idea how valuable that is. I know so many cases where victims desperately need legal representation and simply can't afford it. Then consider it done, she said, turning to her father. Dad, if you can connect me with the right organizations, I'll start immediately. I will, he said, his voice thick with pride. And Daniela? This is the woman I am proud of. This is the person I always hoped you would be. Over the following months, I watched a true change take root. It wasn't perfect. There were stumbles, moments where an old, thoughtless attitude would briefly surface. But every time it happened, Javier or Daniela would catch themselves, apologize immediately, and correct their course. Javier started bringing his work colleagues over for dinner, introducing them to Elias with an unmistakable pride. This is my father, Elias. He's the bravest man I know. Let me tell you the story of how he saved me from a fire when I was 7. And he would tell the whole story, omitting no detail, never minimizing the sacrifice. His colleagues would listen, mesmerized, and look at my husband with genuine awe. Daniela kept her promise. She became deeply involved with 3 different burn victim charities, offering free legal clinics and taking on cases pro bono. She was using her skills to help. Dr. Ruiz continued his work on the book, sending us drafts of Elias's chapter for feedback. This chapter is the heart of the book, he told us. It's not just about the medicine. It's about sacrifice, love, and how scars tell stories that the world needs to hear. 6 months after that Christmas, Dr. Ruiz invited our entire family to New York City. It's a preliminary launch for the book, he explained. I'm presenting select chapters at a major medical conference. I want you to be there when I present Elias's chapter. This story isn't just mine to tell, it's yours to share. So, we all traveled to New York, Elias and I, Javier and Daniela. The event was in a grand hotel ballroom, filled with hundreds of burn specialists from all over the country. Dr. Ruiz took the stage and began his presentation. He spoke of new treatments, of lessons learned, and then, he brought up Elias's chapter. 25 years ago, he began, I met a patient who forever changed my perspective on what it means to be brave. A father who ran through a burning building to save his 7-year-old son. He projected the photos onto a massive screen, the images he had taken in our living room. They were artistic, respectful, showing the extent of the damage but also the incredible healing, a visual testament to my husband's heroism. These scars tell a story, Dr. Ruiz declared. In our society, scars are too often seen as imperfections, as something to be hidden. But these scars, Elias Salazar's scars, they are medals of honor. They are the physical evidence of a love so profound, he was willing to sacrifice his own body to protect his child. The room was utterly silent. Elias is here with us today, Dr. Ruiz continued. And with his permission, I'd like to ask him to please stand. Elias looked at me, his eyes wide with nerves. Edwina, there are so many people. Go on, my love, I whispered. This is your story. It's time to share it. My husband stood up. And that entire audience, hundreds of specialized doctors, people who had seen the worst burns imaginable, rose to their feet with him. They began to applaud. The applause grew, filling the massive room, a wave of recognition from colleagues who understood, better than anyone, exactly what Elias had endured, what he had survived, and what he represented. I watched the tears stream down my husband's face, but for the first time, they were tears of pure joy, of validation, of finally being seen for the hero he was. Javier, standing beside me, was also on his feet, applauding so hard his hands must have hurt, tears streaming down his own face. "Mom," he whispered, "look at that. All these doctors, all these people, they see Dad for who he is." "As it should be, son," I whispered back. "As it always should have been." When the applause finally softened, Dr. Ruiz spoke again. "Elias's son is also here today. Javier, would you please join your father on stage?" Javier froze, then took a deep breath and walked to the stage. He stood next to his father, taking his hand, the scarred hand that had pulled him from the fire 25 years ago. "Javier," Dr. Ruiz said, "would you like to say a few words?" My son looked out at the sea of expectant faces. "When I was 7 years old," he began, his voice shaking but strong, "our house burned down. I don't remember much. But what I do know, what I have finally learned, is that my father ran through those flames to get me. The price he paid, the scars he carries, are a daily reminder of the greatest love that exists." He paused, collecting himself. For years, I am ashamed to admit, I was ashamed of those scars. I asked him to cover them. I asked him to hide. And that is a regret I will carry for the rest of my life. But 6 months ago, my family had a very painful, and very necessary, conversation. And I finally understood. These scars are not something to be ashamed of. They are something to celebrate. So today, he finished, looking at my husband, in front of all of you, the professionals who dedicate your lives to helping people like my father. I want to say publicly, Dad, I am so proud of you. I am proud of your scars. I am proud of your bravery. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure everyone knows the story of the hero who gave me life twice. Once when I was born, and again when he saved me from that fire. The applause that erupted was deafening. I watched my husband pull my son into a fierce hug on that stage, both of them weeping, healing years of pain in that one moment. After the presentation, dozens of doctors approached Elias, shaking his hand, sharing their own stories, thanking him for his courage. That night, our family went to dinner at a beautiful restaurant, joined by Dr. Ruiz. "Elias, Edwina," he said, "the publisher is planning a book tour. And I would like, if you're willing, for you to accompany me. So people can meet the real Elias, not just read about him." Over the next few months, life continued to shift. Javier and Daniela announced she was pregnant. "We're going to have a baby," Javier said, beaming. "And Dad, Mom, we want this baby to grow up knowing their grandfather's story from day one. Not as something hidden, but as the heroic story it is. And we want you, Dad, to be the one to tell them how you got these scars." Elias just cried with joy. And, Javier added, "If it's a boy, we want to name him Elias. In your honor." 6 months later, our grandson was born. Elias Elio Javier. When I held him, I looked at this perfect little child and knew he would grow up knowing the truth, valuing sacrifice, and understanding that scars are stories of love. Dr. Ruiz's book was an unexpected success, resonating far beyond medical circles. Elias and I accompanied him on that book tour. In every city, people were moved. After one event in Detroit, a woman approached with her teenage daughter, Sarah, who had severe burns on her arm and neck. "She's hidden herself for 3 years," the mother wept. "I brought her to hear your story." Elias knelt by the girl. "Sarah," he said gently, holding out his own arm. "These scars are 25 years old. I used to hide them, too. But I learned something. Their discomfort is their problem, not mine. And the people who truly matter, they see beyond the scars. You aren't normal, Sarah. You are extraordinary. You are a warrior. And these scars, this is your battle armor." When we left that night, Elias was glowing. "Edwina," he said, "did you see? We helped that girl. My story, it matters." It always mattered, my love, I told him. It's just that now, the world is finally listening. 2 years after that Christmas that changed everything, our family gathered again. This time, Javier and Daniela arrived early. This time, there were no comments about my husband's clothes, no suggestions he cover up. There was only love. Little Elio, now a toddler, crawled straight to his grandfather and placed his tiny hand on the scarred arm, full of innocent curiosity. Someday, Javier said, watching them, we'll tell him the story. And he will grow up knowing his grandfather is the bravest man in the world. That night, after everyone left, Elias and I sat in the garden. What are you thinking about? I asked him. About how things had to break completely, he said, before they could be rebuilt correctly. That confrontation, as painful as it was necessary. It forced us all to face the truth. And Javier changed, I said. Yes. He did. And you, Elias? How do you feel? He looked down at his arm, the scars silver in the moonlight. I feel proud, he said. For the first time in 25 years, completely proud. Because these scars saved my son. And now, they are helping others, too. I finally found a purpose for the pain. If you are hearing our story, I want you to understand one fundamental thing. Scars, physical or emotional, are not flaws. They are maps of our survival. My husband, Elias, bears his scars because he ran through fire for our son. For years, that son was ashamed, and our daughter-in-law mocked them. One Christmas, it all came to a head when her own father, the very doctor who had saved Elias's life, witnessed the disrespect and forced the truth into the light. It was devastating. But it was necessary. Sometimes, love requires confrontation. Sometimes, teaching respect means implementing real consequences. I changed my will. I gave my son an ultimatum. Some might say I was too harsh. But it was exactly what Javier needed to finally wake up and understand that respect is not optional. Today, 2 years later, I see my son transformed. I see my daughter-in-law using her skills to help others. I see my grandson growing up in a home where his grandfather's scars are celebrated. From my home in Columbus, Ohio, at 63 years old, with a husband who has become an inspiration to thousands, I wish you the courage to confront injustice, even in your own family. I wish you the wisdom to recognize that all scars tell stories that deserve to be heard. That survival is heroic. And that sacrifice for love is the purest form of bravery. Elias taught me that 25 years ago when he ran through that fire. And he continues to teach it to the world today, every time he shows his scars and proves that true love always leaves a mark, and that those marks are beautiful. Thank you for listening.